I lost my wife, but I held on to the house, the garden, the porch swing, the memories. I thought that was enough. Until I found a crumpled note from my grandson, hidden where the roses grow. That was the moment I realized I wasn't growing old in peace. I was being erased. It was a late September morning, one of those half-summer, half-autumn days. The sun still warm, but the breeze already whispering about sweaters. I was out back, kneeling near the east trellis, trimming back Evelyn's roses. That was always her domain, the roses. Now it's mine by default, the kind of inheritance no one wants but keeps anyway. The shears had their rhythm. Snip. 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 The scent of cut stems and old blossoms filled the air. Peaceful. Or it would have been, if not for something odd poking out between the thorny stems. A bit of paper, folded, smudged, and damp around the edges. I almost ignored it. Could have been trash, or a receipt from the hardware store blown in by the wind. But I reached in, careful not to get snagged, and pulled it out. The paper was soft, like it had sat there a while. But it wasn't trash. I knew that handwriting. Max. I unfolded it slowly. My fingers hesitated before I read the first line. I don't know why. Maybe I already knew. Dad and Mom said the lawyers are coming soon. They want the garden house to be liquidated. I think it means sold. Please don't let them. I stopped breathing. I read it again. Then a third time. My grandson, 10 years old, quiet, thoughtful Max, had written this. The boy who still said please and thank you without being reminded. Who always helped me carry tools when they visited. Who sat in the garden house and read old books like he was guarding something ancient. He knew something. And now, so did I. I sat back hard on the grass. My knees screamed in protest, but I barely noticed. I just sat there, holding that note like it was a live wire. Liquidated. Not cleaned up. Not fixed. Not even sold like a normal person might say. That was a word someone fed him. Lillian or Greg. It wasn't an accident. It was leakage. Sloppy talk in front of a kid who listens more than he speaks. I looked across the yard at the garden house. It sat half in shadow beneath the walnut tree, yellow paint faded to near cream. A single pane cracked in the west window. Chipped steps. Weeds nibbling at the base. But it stood. It stood like it always had, through snow and sun and everything in between. The same place Evelyn used to retreat to when the house got too loud, or when grief wouldn't leave her alone. She'd bake in there, write letters, read the same poetry over and over. It was her soul's room. When she passed, I left everything inside untouched. It had been weeks since I'd gone in. Now I walked there like it was calling me. The padlock still worked. The key still sat above the doorframe. I turned it and opened the door. Dust, wood, lavender. It was all still here. Her apron. The stack of gardening books. A half-filled crossword on the desk, yellowed with time. I stepped inside. My hand found the old chair she used to sit in, the one with the faded cushion that made your back hurt after 10 minutes. I eased into it anyway and let my eyes adjust. Max was trying to warn me. That wasn't a note, it was a flare. A signal. And it told me two things. 1, Lillian and Greg were circling. The kind of circling you don't notice until a bite's already been taken. 2, I wasn't losing my mind. For a while now, I'd felt something in the air. The visits that felt too polished. The way Greg kept checking in on my accounts. The conversations about downsizing that felt more like interviews than concern. I didn't have hard proof, until today. I opened the top drawer of Evelyn's desk, moved aside her seed packets, and placed Max's note gently beneath them. Then I sat back and looked around. The garden house was never on any list of assets. No one ever asked about it during probate. It was just, there. Quiet. Untouched. Unbothered. And now they were sniffing around it. I stared out the dusty window. The roses danced in the breeze, oblivious. I'd been too quiet. Too still. They must have taken my grief as a sign I was ready to fade. But I am not gone. I am not finished. And I am not giving them this house, or any piece of Evelyn's memory, without a damn fight. I sat there for a long time. No plan yet. Just the certainty of one coming. They want the garden house. They want to cash it out like some forgotten CD or junk bond. Then they've declared something. And I intend to answer. It started with the sound of tires on gravel, the slow, smug crunch of people who know they're uninvited but show up anyway. I was on the porch, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and watching the wind roll over the hedges when I saw Greg's silver SUV pull into the driveway. Lillian sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses too big for her face, probably meant to look effortless and expensive. They hadn't called. No text. No email. Not even a fake, just checking in message. Just appeared. Greg stepped out holding a bottle of wine like a peace offering and a bribe wrapped in one. Lillian had a pie, her signature move. I'd seen her bake exactly once, and it ended with flour in the dog's ears. But she knew I liked apple, so now she weaponized it. "Dad," she called, as if nothing in the world had shifted. As if my home wasn't being quietly eyed like a foreclosed property. I didn't smile. But I didn't scowl either. Instead, I stood, nodded once, and opened the screen door. Let the game begin. We sat at the old dining table, the one Evelyn and I bought for $75 at a church fundraiser 30 years ago. Still solid. Still mine. They brought the charm early, Greg with his dad jokes, Lillian with her curated warmth. She asked about the garden, complimented the rosemary, even said Max missed me. I wanted to ask why Max hadn't been allowed to call. But I bit my tongue. They needed to talk. That much was clear. I could feel it in the way Greg's leg bounced beneath the table and how Lillian kept smoothing her hair. There was a pitch coming. I could smell it before the first line was even delivered. "You've made this place so beautiful, Dad," Lillian said finally, voice syrupy. I sipped my coffee. Always liked it. "It's just, a lot," she continued. "A big property, for one person." Greg chimed in. "Exactly. I mean, maintaining a yard like this. A house with stairs, no security system. We just worry, that's all. That's all." The most dishonest phrase in the English language. I nodded. "Let them go on. And we've been looking into some really lovely communities," Lillian said, now leaning in like a conspirator. "Independent living, not a nursing home, don't get the wrong idea. Just, simpler. Safer." I looked out the window. The sunlight hit the garden house just right, throwing gold over the roof like a spotlight. Greg leaned forward. "We've even spoken to a few agents, just casually. Market's hot right now. You could make a real profit, put it towards something comfortable." There it was. I didn't answer. I just stood, walked to the kitchen, and retrieved a notepad from the drawer. I always kept it there, habit from Evelyn. She wrote everything down. Groceries, weather, dreams. I flipped it open and jotted, September 19th. Visit. Wine plus pie. Topic, downsizing. Property discussion began 12:17 p.m. I returned to the table. Lillian tilted her head. "Everything okay?" "Just taking notes," I said flatly. "You never know what you might forget later." The pie sat on the counter, untouched. The wine remained corked. They noticed. Greg cleared his throat. Look, we just want what's best for you. This house, it's a lot. And the market's not going to stay up forever. And you think I should sell? He shrugged, carefully. Eventually, sure. Why not when it benefits everyone? Everyone. Lillian jumped in, sensing the misstep. We don't mean us. We mean you, Dad. You could travel. Live with less stress. Think of it as turning a page. I thought of Evelyn, standing barefoot in the garden with her hair tied back in a red bandana. Dirt on her cheek. Laughter in her throat. Pages. This place wasn't a chapter, it was the whole book. They talked for another 20 minutes, circling the idea like vultures too polite to swoop. I played the polite host. Listened. Nodded. Didn't argue. But I watched them closely. I wrote everything down. Eventually, Greg stood. Well, we should get going. Max's piano lessons in half an hour. Right. That's why Max hadn't come. Another lesson, another obligation. Or maybe just another excuse. Lillian hugged me, stiff, performative. Greg offered a firm handshake like we just finished a business lunch. And then they were gone. I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. The silence came back like an old friend, stretching across the house. I went to the window and watched the SUV disappear down the road. Then I opened the notebook again. They want the house. They've already spoken to lawyers. They didn't bring Max. The wine sat on the table, sweating. The pie was cooling in its tin, untouched. I stared at them for a while. Then I picked up the pie, walked out to the back garden, and left it inside the garden house. Right on Evelyn's desk. A silent offering. Or a reminder. Whatever they were planning, I wasn't in the dark anymore. I had seen enough. They think this house is a problem to solve. But they've forgotten one thing. I built it. And I'll bury it before I let them take it. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept the lamp on in the hallway, the same way Evelyn used to during storms. Not because I was afraid of the dark, no, that's never been my nature, but because it reminded me of what matters. A small light, steady in the shadows. I reread Max's note 3 times before bed. Kept it tucked inside my shirt pocket like a charm, or maybe a weapon. My hand found it again and again, like a touchstone. Every time I held it, my heart tightened, but something else steadied, my spine. They wanted to liquidate the garden house. They were circling like wolves wrapped in smiles. And I needed to know where I stood, legally, emotionally, everything. So at 6:42 a.m. I made the call. Tom answered on the second ring, voice still coated in sleep. Frank. Morning, I said. I need to talk. There was a pause. Then, give me 20 minutes. By 7:15, Tom was at my kitchen table, wearing his old Carhartt coat and drinking my worst coffee without complaint. He looked the same as always, lean, pale, hair going like mine. We'd been friends since '76, back when he was fresh out of law school and Evelyn insisted I get actual legal documents instead of handshake promises. Good advice. Like most things Evelyn said. I handed him the notebook. The one I'd been writing in since the family visit. He flipped through it in silence, stopping every few pages to glance up at me. His eyes darkened when he reached Max's letter. Jesus, he muttered. I waited. When he closed the notebook, he set it gently on the table like it might explode. You haven't signed anything, right? Nothing they gave you? I shook my head. Not yet. But I'm sure it's coming. Tom rubbed his jaw. You've still got full control of your estate, far as I can tell. That includes the house, the property, the garden structure, everything. Unless you sign over any portion of your assets or give them power of attorney, they can't touch it. He paused, then leaned forward. But if you do, even accidentally, they could clean you out, Frank. I looked at him. I've seen it, he continued. You wouldn't believe how often kids do this to their parents. Wrap it in nice language. Retirement plans. Simplification. Downsizing. Meanwhile, they're dividing the inheritance like you're already in the ground. A cold weight settled in my chest. And power of attorney? I asked. He nodded grimly. It's the key. They'll call it a precaution or say it's for emergencies. But if you give that up, you give them everything, your bank account, your home, your medical decisions. They could sell the property while you're still living in it and move you to a care facility you can't stand. I didn't say anything. Just stood up, walked to the sink, and stared out the window. The light outside had changed. A sharp kind of sunlight. The kind that turns autumn gold into something more like fire. What can I do? I asked finally. Tom leaned back in the chair. We start documenting everything. That notebook. Keep it going. Every visit. Every call. Every suspicious document. And don't sign a damn thing until I've seen it. He paused again. We should revisit your will. And we'll put the house in a living trust. If you're worried about Max, we can name him as the beneficiary for the house when you're gone. That way, it bypasses probate. Can't be seized. Can't be sold out from under him. And they wouldn't be able to touch it? I asked. No. Not without a court order or your signature. And once the trust is solid, it's damn near bulletproof. I nodded slowly. It was starting to make sense now. Their behavior. The pressure. The pie and wine. They didn't just want me to be okay. They wanted me out of the way. I looked at the clock. 8:23 a.m. What do we need to do first? I asked. Tom grinned. Get your paperwork. And tell me where you keep the old deed. By noon, we'd gone through every file I had. Tax statements, the deed to the house, Evelyn's will, even old letters. I kept good records. Evelyn made sure of that. Tom made copies, scribbled notes, flagged the things we'd need for the trust paperwork. Then he looked at me with a new seriousness. If they send you anything, a form, a request, a letter taped to the door, call me. Don't wait. I nodded. As he stood to leave, he paused at the front door. And Frank. I turned to him. They think you're a soft target. You're not. But don't underestimate how far they'll go when money's on the table. I saw him out, then stood alone in the hallway, listening to the house settle around me. The walls creaked. The old heater kicked on. The floorboards remembered Evelyn's weight better than mine. That night, I wrote in the notebook again. Spoke to Tom. Living trust in motion. House will go to Max. We'll update when forms are ready. Then I flipped to a blank page and wrote something else. They don't get to take what Evelyn built. Not while I still breathe. I signed it. And I slept better that night than I had in weeks. They didn't knock. They didn't call. They didn't even pretend. I found the envelope taped to the front door at 6:47 a.m. sharp, the timestamp burned into my brain because that's when the newspaper usually hits the front steps. But not today. No thump of newsprint. Just silence and that envelope, like a warning pin to my chest. It wasn't big. Just a regular manila folder sealed with blue painter's tape, neat and deliberate. Someone didn't want it blown away. Or missed. Or mistaken. My name was written on the front in Lillian's handwriting, loopy and too careful, the kind of cursive that comes from someone who's always trying to make messes look tidy. I stood there barefoot on the porch boards, still in my robe. The morning was damp, and the boards were cold underfoot, but I didn't go back inside right away. I just stared at it, hand frozen halfway to the tape. I knew what was inside before I opened it. Some part of me had known for weeks. But seeing it? That was different. I peeled back the tape, slowly, and slid out the contents. On top was a yellow sticky note. Just sign when you're ready, Dad. We want to make things easier for you. Lillian. Underneath it, the power of attorney form. Neatly printed. Filled out. Signed by Lillian already. All it needed was my signature. I stood there in the quiet, wind rustling through the sycamores out front, and felt a kind of cold I hadn't known since Evelyn passed. Not the kind that touches your skin. The kind that seeps into your ribs. The kind that feels like betrayal soaked in tea and sugar. Make things easier. That's what people say before they erase you. I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the porch swing with the envelope in my lap and watched the street. The same street I'd watched Max ride his bike down last summer, helmet too big, legs pedaling like mad. The same street Evelyn used to walk in the evenings, waving to every dog like it was her own. This was my home. And they were trying to sign it away with a sticky note. I stared at that sentence, just sign when you're ready, like it might burst into flame if I looked hard enough. There was no mention of lawyers. No courtesy call. Just the pre-filled form and that condescending little message, like I was being invited to a company potluck instead of the dismantling of my life. And that was what chilled me the most. Not the document itself. But how casual they made it. As if this had already been decided. As if my part in it was a formality. I brought it inside and laid it flat on the kitchen table. No dramatic gestures. No tearing it in half or setting it on fire, tempting as that was. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I opened my laptop, scanned the form, and emailed it to Tom. Subject, it came. Then I walked out to the garden. The air was heavy, thick with early dew and the smell of soil. I sat by the climbing roses and stared at the garden house, the same corner Max used to sneak off to with his sketchpad, the one Evelyn had painted sun yellow on a whim during one long June afternoon. I remembered the exact way she stood on the ladder, brush dripping, singing half-forgotten Beatles lyrics while I held the bass and laughed. I remembered every minute of building that little house. I didn't remember giving it to anyone. My phone buzzed at 8:04 a.m. Tom. Don't sign it, he said without preamble. They've already designated your daughter as agent. That means full authority over finances, medical decisions, real estate. You sign that form, and within a week, you could be in a care facility wondering why your account's been emptied. I listened. Silent. It's the clean version, Frank, he continued. No traps. But the trap is the paper. If you give her that power, she doesn't need to ask you anything again. I took a deep breath. Can we build protections now? I asked. We already started, he said. But now we escalate. He gave me instructions: revise the will immediately, fast-track the trust, and set up a healthcare directive that bypasses the power of attorney entirely. I wrote everything down in the notebook. Then I stared at the paper on the table for a long time. It looked so innocent. Just ink on paper. But it wasn't. It was an invitation to disappear. Legally. And it came from my daughter. That afternoon, I walked to the shed and pulled out the old filing box. The one Evelyn had labeled, "For When It Matters." Inside were insurance documents, copies of the house deed, old letters, her will, and a bundle of things I hadn't touched since the funeral. I sat there on the floor of the shed, dust in the air, Evelyn's handwriting on every envelope. She never trusted blindly. She loved deeply, but she planned. That's what this was now. A plan. Not anger. Not vengeance. But protection. I took the documents inside and scanned them all to Tom. Then I took the envelope Lillian had left and placed it inside a Ziploc bag, wrote the date on the outside, and filed it under incoming pressure in the drawer. Let them think I'm old. Let them think I'm compliant. The truth is, I'm awake now. And they have no idea who they just tried to bury. Some people fight with noise, shouting, slamming doors, throwing words like stones. That's never been me. I fight like the garden does. Quiet. Intentional. Patient. The day after the envelope, I didn't call Lillian. I didn't mention the papers. I didn't even acknowledge the sticky note. That would have given them what they wanted, a reaction. Instead, I began planting the plan, one route at a time. First call, Vanessa Clark, notary public, old friend of Evelyn's, and someone who owed me a favor. She picked up on the second ring. Frank, she said, surprised. I need a witness, I said. For some things I'm setting in motion. There was a pause, then her voice sharpened. You want me discreet, don't you? I want you invisible. She came by that afternoon under the guise of afternoon tea. Nobody watching would have thought twice. She wore a peach cardigan and carried lemon bars like she was visiting a neighbor, not documenting the first strike in a quiet war. We sat in the sunroom. She listened. Took notes. Explained what she could do, and more importantly, what she couldn't. You bring me anything you want notarized, she said, voice low. And I'll sign it. But if your daughter tries to contest any of this, you'll need more than me. You'll need people. I already had someone in mind. Luis had worked on our yard for 8 years. Not just a gardener, he was a quiet observer, the kind who noticed things without needing to speak them aloud. He knew this house, the history, the heartbeat. More importantly, he knew Evelyn. She trusted him. That was enough. I caught him Thursday morning as he was laying new mulch along the side fence. You see the white SUV that's been showing up? I asked casually. He nodded. Every few weeks now. I handed him a bottle of cold water. They're going to try and move me out of here. His brow furrowed. You serious? They already sent paperwork. He paused, water bottle untouched in his hand. Can I ask you something? Of course. If the time comes, would you be willing to be a witness to how they act around me? If they pressure me. If they try to get me to sign things. Even if it's just standing nearby while we talk. He didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I nodded. Then you're part of the plan. Later that evening, I called Max's school counselor, a woman named Dr. Halvorsen. It took some finagling, but once I explained the situation, in the gentlest, most concerned tone I could muster, she agreed to meet with me. We sat across from each other in her office, fluorescent lights buzzing above us like anxious flies. I showed her the note Max had left me. Watched her face as she read it. Her jaw tightened. You believe he's being told not to visit? I know it, I said. And I don't want him used as a pawn. She nodded slowly. He talks about you often. The garden. The house. The little yellow shed. He feels safe there. Then I need to make sure it stays safe. She agreed to document anything Max said about home life, visits, or sudden restrictions. She wouldn't break confidentiality, but if things escalated, she said, she could testify. And that was enough for now. Tom came by 3 times that week. We worked late into the evenings, revising my will and setting up the living trust. The trust was a thing of beauty, legal armor. The house, the garden, and the garden house would all fall into it. I would retain complete control until death or declared incapacity, but the trust would pass directly to Max upon my passing. Not Lillian. Not Greg. Only Max, technically, Tom said, pen tapping the document, they could contest it. But it would look bad. Really bad. Especially with a counselor, a notary, and a long-time gardener all testifying on your behalf. Good, I said. Then let them try. We drafted a clause that if Lillian or Greg attempted to challenge the trust, they'd be removed as financial beneficiaries in every other part of the estate. We made it clear, cooperation meant legacy. Interference meant forfeiture. I signed it. Then Vanessa signed it. And Tom notarized it with a flourish. I tucked the finished copy into a fireproof box. Then I made 3 duplicates, one for Tom, one for Vanessa's files, and one to be held in the bank's safe deposit box under my name only. The house was no longer vulnerable. Neither was Max's inheritance. And they didn't know. That was the most powerful part of it all. They still thought I was sleeping. Still thought I was the old man on the porch with a mug and no plan. But now. Now I had legal walls, documented allies, and time on my side. The final step that week was subtler. I began logging every interaction. Every visit. Every call. Every word that could later be twisted. I became my own historian. The garden was my fortress. The documents were my defense. And Max was the reason I'd burn the whole world down before I let them take this house. There's something oddly theatrical about betrayal when it comes dressed in politeness. When the attack isn't loud or violent, but slow, calculated, and delivered with sugar and ceramic teacups. They came that day like a scene out of a suburban drama, smiles painted on, voices too bright, hands full of gifts. But I saw through it. I'd lived too long, lost too much, and trusted just enough to recognize a performance when I saw one. Greg's silver SUV rolled up the gravel path at 10:02 a.m., punctual as if the moment had been rehearsed. Lillian stepped out first, hair curled tight, wearing that pastel blue blouse she always picked for moments she wanted to appear soft. Greg followed, carrying what looked like another pie, cherry this time, and a fresh bottle of red. I didn't bother checking the label. I greeted them with my usual nod, not offering a hug, not pretending I was happy to see them. The door creaked open as they stepped in like it was still their house. I offered tea. Not out of kindness. Out of ceremony. They sat in the sunroom. Evelyn's sunroom. I brought the tea in slowly, deliberately. Earl Grey, steeped just right. I poured it as they settled in, the pie now resting like a peace treaty on the table between us. Lillian smiled too widely. Dad, the garden looks beautiful. Greg nodded. Seriously. You've really kept the place going. I took my seat, hands folded in my lap, watching them the way one watches foxes circling a coop. Glad you think so, I said. Would be a shame to lose it. They laughed, but it didn't last. We've been thinking, Lillian began, setting her cup down gently, that it might be time to really consider your long-term comfort. We want to help you think through the future. Greg picked it up from there. A smaller place. Safer. More manageable. You deserve ease in your golden years. Golden years. The way he said it, you'd think I was already halfway embalmed. I let the quiet stretch. I looked past them, to the garden house out the window. Sunlight was glinting off the old metal latch like it was winking at me. That little house knew everything now, all the documents, the trust, the notary. I let them talk. About streamlining, and how transitions can be beautiful. About selling while the market is hot. They even threw in a comment about community gardens in those retirement neighborhoods, as if that would scratch the same itch as walking barefoot through Evelyn's roses. Eventually, I leaned forward. My fingers curled around my cup. Do you know Vanessa Clark? I asked, voice low. They paused. Lillian frowned slightly. That name sounds familiar. She's in the kitchen, I said. Not here for tea. She's a notary. And she's recording this conversation. The shift in their faces was instant. Not outrage. Not confusion. Just panic, trying hard to hide under neutral expressions. I've set up a living trust, I continued. The house, the garden house, all of it is protected now. Upon my passing, it goes directly to Max. No probate. No dispute. No sale. Lillian blinked. Greg leaned back in his chair, arms folded. Dad, she began. No, I interrupted. No more pretending. You taped a power of attorney form to my door. You filled it out with your name. All I had to do was sign it. You didn't even ask me first. That wasn't what we... Don't lie, I said. Please, not here. Not in this room. The air shifted. The sun didn't feel warm anymore. Greg's voice tightened. We were trying to help. You've isolated yourself. You've been acting erratically. You mean thinking clearly? That's not erratic, Greg. That's called waking up. Lillian looked hurt now, or maybe just cornered. We were worried. You're alone here. What if something happens? If something happens, I've already made arrangements, I said. Medical directive. Emergency contacts. Legal protection. The only people I need to worry about hurting me are sitting at this table. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded. Tense. Like a branch ready to snap. I stood slowly. My legs weren't what they used to be, but they held me. I've spoken to Tom. To Vanessa. To Max's school counselor. I've got witnesses. Records. Audio. If you push this any further, you'll be the ones answering questions. Greg stood too. You're threatening us. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself. The way Evelyn always said I should. Vanessa stepped into view from the kitchen doorway then, holding the small recorder in her palm like a badge. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The moment cracked. Lillian stood. Greg grabbed the pie off the table, an absurd gesture in the middle of it all. They were already halfway to the door when I added one final line. I will always open my arms to Max, I said. But this house. This legacy. It's no longer up for discussion. The door shut with a finality that shook the air. I sank into Evelyn's chair, the warmth of the confrontation still burning in my chest. Outside, a breeze rustled the trees. The heron-shaped wind chime Evelyn had hung before she passed gave a low, metallic sigh. And I knew, they would come back. But not the same way. Now they'd come cautious. And that was the first real victory. 2 weeks of silence. That's what followed the tea confrontation. 2 weeks of no phone calls. No unannounced visits. No emails about checking in or downsizing opportunities. At first, it felt like relief. Like the house could finally exhale. But then the absence thickened. Like fog that refused to lift. Max didn't come. No text. No call. No footsteps on the gravel. No, "Hey, Grandpa," shouted from the porch like he always did when they pulled up. I told myself it was school. Maybe soccer. Maybe piano practice. Maybe something completely innocent. But I knew better. Something about the quiet was too pointed. Too hollow. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was punishment. I started checking my phone obsessively. It stayed on the kitchen table all day, screen up, ringer on. I kept it in my pocket when I walked the garden. I even charged it overnight next to my bed, just in case Max decided to call. He never did. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was the memory. The last time I saw him, he hugged me around the waist, tight and wordless. His backpack bumped against my knees. He whispered, tell the garden house I'll be back soon. Now it stood out there like a lighthouse with no ship on the water. By the 10th day, I gave in and called the school. I asked for the counselor. Dr. Halvorsen. She remembered me immediately. Mr. Whitmore, she said kindly, I was wondering if I'd hear from you. We spoke for 20 quiet minutes. I didn't press. She couldn't legally tell me much. But she told me just enough. Max had asked her if he could bring a painting to me. He'd made it in art class, a watercolor of the garden, she said. With lots of blue and green. A little yellow house in the middle. But he hadn't been allowed. They told him you needed space, she said gently. They said you'd been under stress. I thanked her. Hung up. And sat there in the kitchen until the sun moved across the floor and the shadows changed. I didn't cry. But I felt something break in my chest, not like a twig. Like an old beam under too much weight. I didn't write in my notebook that night. I couldn't. I just stared at the ceiling and remembered Evelyn's voice. Frank, don't wait for people to do right. They'll drag their feet until your life's over. Protect what matters. The next morning, I called Tom. I'm done reacting, I said. They're keeping him from me. I won't let them win this quietly. Tom's voice was steel. Then we fight. That afternoon, we sat in his office, surrounded by case files and legal pads. His coffee smelled burnt. His eyes were sharp. He walked me through every option, letters, mediation, warning notices. Or, he said, tapping a yellow folder, we go straight to court. Will it hold up? I asked. We have documentation, he said. Notes. Dates. The letter from Max. The notary recordings. The school counselor as a potential witness. You're not some senile old man rambling about memories. You're prepared. I signed the petition for grandparent visitation that day. It wasn't just about tea and gardens anymore. It was about my grandson. About what they were keeping from him. About what they were turning me into, a ghost he was no longer allowed to speak of. The filing took 2 days. On the 3rd, Lillian broke the silence. She didn't call. She emailed. Subject, let's talk. Asterisk Dad. We didn't think it would come to this. We're disappointed you've involved lawyers. Max is confused. He's asking questions. This isn't what Mom would have wanted. We can fix this, but you need to stop. Please. What you're doing is hurting him. Asterisk. Lillian. No greeting. No love. Just that passive-aggressive guilt dressed up as concern. Evelyn's name used like a pawn. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words. But because I had evidence. The next day, Greg called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through my speakers like a sermon from a preacher who didn't believe what he was saying. Frank, we don't understand why you're doing this. You're making it harder for everyone. We can fix this. But you have to stop. You have to let go. If you don't, we'll have to explore other legal options. This is hurting Max. And it's hurting you. There it was. Not even subtle anymore. A threat wrapped in family wrapping paper. I forwarded the voicemail to Tom and Vanessa. I printed it. Logged it. Highlighted key phrases. We'll have to explore other legal options. I sat in the garden that night, the same place Max used to dig holes too shallow for the daffodil bulbs and laugh when they popped out of the dirt. The moonlight fell in patches through the trees. The garden house looked soft and small. Vulnerable. But it wasn't. It was protected now. I'd built something they couldn't touch. And now I was ready to do the same for myself. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. It was about identity. They wanted to erase the old man in the garden. Replace him with a silent name on a bank transfer. A signature on a contract. A shell. But I wasn't hollow. I was still here. And I wasn't backing down. I've never liked courtrooms. Not because I fear them. But because of what they represent, a place where people wear masks, where truth gets filtered through language, and where family becomes adversary under oath. But I sat in that stiff-backed chair anyway, wearing my best blazer and the tie Evelyn gave me 20 years ago, navy blue, a little frayed at the edge. My hands didn't shake. My mind didn't drift. I was there for Max. And that meant there wasn't room for nerves. Lillian and Greg sat across the aisle. She wore gray. He wore arrogance. They didn't look at me. I didn't look at them. The judge was a woman named Rodriguez, sharp-eyed, mid-50s, no nonsense. She read through the initial filings with a speed that told me this wasn't her first time seeing a family fall apart over a child. Petitioner is requesting court-mandated visitation rights with his minor grandson, she said, glancing at me. Is that correct, Mr. Whitmore? Yes, Your Honor. And the respondents, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, are contesting on the grounds of what, exactly? Greg stood. Your Honor, we believe Mr. Whitmore is in cognitive decline. His recent behavior has been erratic. He has been uncommunicative, and we fear continued contact may confuse our son and destabilize the progress we've made in therapy. Therapy. That was new. Lillian nodded along. She looked like she practiced it in the mirror. Her hands folded just right. Her voice soft when she was asked to confirm Greg's statement. Then it was my turn. Tom stood first. Calm. Precise. We contest the allegation of cognitive decline. Mr. Whitmore has been the victim of increasing coercion, manipulation, and emotional isolation by the respondents, all under the guise of concern. We have documentation, witnesses, and audio to support his claim. The judge raised an eyebrow. Audio? Tom clicked play. Vanessa's recording filled the courtroom. The sunroom conversation. The laughter. The legal bait. And then my voice, asking, plain as daylight, are you trying to sell my home without my consent? The silence that followed cracked the performance in half. The judge looked at Lillian. That was you speaking, correct? Lillian shifted. Yes, but... Let's move on. Next came the letter Max had hidden in the rose bush. I'd scanned it. Preserved the original in a fireproof box. But the judge read the copy. Dad and Mom said the lawyers are coming soon. They want the garden house to be liquidated. I think it means sold. Please don't let them. She read it twice. Then she asked if I felt capable of managing my estate. I sat up straighter. Yes, ma'am, I said. I handle my banking. I maintain my property. I manage my medications, insurance, and taxes. I even keep logs of when the squirrels get into the compost bin. That got a chuckle from the bailiff. I continued, voice even, I've also built a living trust. With counsel. I've assigned no power of attorney. I've notarized all updates to my will. And if I may, I can recite every Latin name for the flowers in my garden. Evelyn made me memorize them. She smiled, just barely. Proceed. Then Tom called Dr. Halvorsen. She spoke kindly but firmly. Told the court that Max was not confused, he was afraid of being kept from his grandfather. She shared that he had asked to visit. That he had brought drawings of the garden to class. That, Mr. Whitmore's home was his comfort place. And then Tom asked the big question. Doctor, do you believe the child is being emotionally manipulated regarding his grandfather? She paused. I believe Max is being put in the middle of adult conflict that he neither understands nor caused. And yes. I believe he is being told things that do not align with his own feelings. Lillian's eyes turned glassy. Greg folded his arms. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore. What exactly are you asking the court to grant you? 2 weekends a month, I said. And 1 Sunday lunch. That's it. She nodded slowly. And what do you plan to do with that time? I smiled. Let him draw. Let him ask questions. Show him where the soil's softest in spring. Let him be a kid in a place that still remembers how to be quiet. When the judge spoke again, it wasn't dramatic. No gavel slam. Just clarity. I find the petitioner competent. I find the child's emotional connection with the petitioner credible. And I find the respondent's actions questionable at best. Visitation is granted, 2 weekends per month, and alternating Sundays. Additional holidays at the court's discretion. Lillian gasped. Greg looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. I stood, shook Tom's hand, and felt something return to me, not just the ruling. Dignity. In the hallway, I passed them. They didn't speak. But I did. I stopped, turned, and said, "You tried to cut the roots out from under me. But you forgot something." They stared. Roots grow back. I walked away. The garden waited. And so did Max. You don't feel a fortress being built until the last brick is set. By then, it's already solid. By then, it's already too late for anyone to break in without permission. That's what the house had become. Not just a structure. Not a memory box. Not a place I was clinging to because I was too stubborn to let go. It had become the final act of protection I had left to give. And now, with the trust finalized, it was finally safe. It happened on a Wednesday. The kind of day that sneaks up on you without fanfare. Sunlight through the kitchen window. A second cup of black coffee. I was wearing the cardigan Evelyn had knitted for me back in '03, the elbows patched with suede now. It still smelled faintly of her drawer sachets. Tom arrived with the final paperwork in a plain folder. It could have been mistaken for a recipe book or some unremarkable tax return. But it wasn't. This was the keystone. The trust is now legally active, he said, setting the folder on the kitchen table. Signed, notarized, filed, and duplicated. He slid it over to me and opened to the key page. A simple statement. Upon the death of the grantor, the property known as 186, Maple Lane shall transfer to the beneficiary, Maxwell James Carter, in its entirety. I stared at that line for longer than I meant to. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't poetic. But they held more weight than anything I'd read since Evelyn's will. Tom watched me carefully. You understand what this means, Frank? Even if Lillian tries to challenge it, she'll have to go through me, Vanessa, and Luis. And every bit of documentation we've collected. I nodded. I understand. This house will be his, he said. And until then, no one can sell it. No one can mortgage it. No one can touch it. He tapped the table gently with his finger. It's yours, until it's his. And only yours. A silence passed. Not awkward, sacred. I finally asked, can we include the garden house specifically? Tom smiled. Already did. I exhaled. That little yellow house. Evelyn's impulsive summer project. Max's hideaway. My sanctuary. That structure was never about square footage. It was about identity. And now, it was preserved. We walked through the rest of the documents, healthcare directives, witness affidavits, digital backups, and even a copy scanned onto a secure USB. Redundancy is safety, Tom said. In a war like this, you need layers. I thought back to Lillian's sticky note, just sign when you're ready. She had no idea I'd be the one building the trap. Later that afternoon, I called Luis. He was out back trimming the hedges when I waved him over. I handed him an envelope. Inside, a formal acknowledgement naming him as a secondary trustee, should anything happen to me or Tom before Max came of age. A formality, maybe. But an important one. "You trust me with this?" he asked quietly. "I trust you more than most of my blood." He nodded once. Folded the paper. Didn't ask questions. That's what I've always admired about Luis. His loyalty isn't loud, it's dependable. "I'll take care of it like it's mine," he said. "It already is," I told him. That night, I pulled out Evelyn's old ledger, the one where she used to log every expense for the garden, how much mulch cost in '97, when the tulips bloomed too early in '01, what species of butterfly first landed on the hydrangea bed. I flipped to the last page. Blank. I wrote. "The house is protected. The garden lives on. The trust is locked. Max will inherit everything, just like we hoped." Then I dated it and tucked it back where it belonged. The garden house sat quietly in the dusk, its yellow paint slightly faded, but stronger than ever. It was never about how pretty it looked. It was about who it sheltered. And now, it had legal guardianship. And still, the Carters knew nothing. Not about the trust. Not about the notary logs. Not about the court-bolstered healthcare directives. They thought they'd won a silence. But I'd been busy in that silence, planting defenses they couldn't uproot. And soon, they'd see it. 2 days later, Lillian called. It wasn't venom this time. It was softness, practiced, slippery softness. "Hi, Dad." "Lillian. I was wondering if maybe we could talk. Maybe over lunch." I waited. She continued, "Greg and we've been thinking. Maybe we went about things the wrong way. Maybe we let our anxiety speak too loud." I said nothing. She pressed on. "We want to understand. We want to know what you're thinking. What your plans are. We're still your family, Dad." I finally spoke. "I'd be happy to have you both for dinner. Sunday." A pause. "Really? Really?" She sounded surprised. That made me smile. I didn't tell her anything else. Didn't mention the trust. Didn't mention Vanessa. Didn't mention that Greg's voicemail had been archived under a folder labeled "Leverage." Let them come. Let them try again. The door would be open. But the walls? Now, they were stone. It started with the painting. Wrapped in craft paper, tied with garden twine, and leaning quietly against the porch bench, like it had walked there on its own and waited for me to notice. It looked out of place, and at the same time, as if it belonged there all along. Taped to the front was a note, short and written in the familiar, blocky scrawl I'd memorized in birthday cards and sticky notes left on my fridge. "I made this for you. Mom said I could come this weekend. I hope the irises are still there. Max." Just reading it made something twist in my chest. Not the usual ache of loss. This was something sharper, hope, maybe. Or maybe the soft, impossible disbelief that after everything, after courtrooms and voicemails and garden-side whispers of war, he was coming home. I didn't unwrap the painting right away. I carried it inside like a fragile animal, set it on the old wooden bench in the garden house, and stared at it until the sun shifted and warmed the floor beneath it. I wanted to wait. I wanted him to be there when I saw it. And he was. The next morning, I heard the tires first. Slow, cautious crunching over the gravel. Not Lillian's oversized SUV. Not Greg's leased Tesla. Just a modest, practical sedan that stopped a respectful few feet from the gate. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Max, with his backpack half-zipped, a sketch pad under one arm, and something in his walk that nearly undid me. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. He just ran. Grandpa. I met him halfway, knees already protesting, and caught him in the kind of hug that steals the breath right out of your lungs. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I did my best not to cry. I think I succeeded. Mostly. He helped me carry the painting into the garden house. The moment we unwrapped it, the air shifted. It was watercolors, his favorite medium. The background was a soft, bleeding gray, fading into lavender and gold. In the center stood a tall heron, legs half submerged in a still pond, surrounded by purple irises. Its posture was unshakable, like it had stood there for centuries. He looked at me, and in the quietest voice, said, "It's you." I looked from him to the painting, then back again. Me? He nodded. You wait. You don't run when people yell. I almost broke. Instead, I pulled the painting to my chest and gave him a shaky smile. We didn't do much that day, and that was the beauty of it. He followed me around like he used to, asking about the plants, doodling in his sketchpad, pointing out birds I hadn't noticed. We burned the toast at breakfast and laughed about it. He tried to carry the compost bin and dropped it halfway to the garden. I didn't scold him. We just cleaned it up and went on with our day. That night, we sat in the garden house with a single lamp on. The windows fogged gently in the cool. He had a mug of cocoa. I had chamomile tea, but it didn't really matter what was in the cups. What mattered was that we were there, warm, together, whole. Before bed, he asked, "Will Mom be mad I came?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But that's not your job to worry about." He nodded, though his lips were tight. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You belong here," I said. His eyes welled up a little, but he blinked it away. "Thanks for keeping the house safe," he whispered. I smiled. "Thanks for reminding me why it mattered." The next morning came too fast. I made pancakes, and we listened to a cassette Evelyn had recorded years ago, birdsong layered with soft piano. He didn't say much, but I caught him humming to it while he colored in a new drawing. A wren, this time. We packed his things slowly. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew what we were trying to do, stretch the hours just a little longer. When the car pulled up, Greg, this time, alone, I walked Max out. The gate creaked open, and he turned to me just before getting into the back seat. "Can I come again next weekend?" I didn't hesitate. "Of course." He smiled. A full smile, the kind I hadn't seen since this all began. He opened the door, then paused. Leaned in. "You're like Grandma," he whispered. I froze. "Why do you say that?" He shrugged, eyes on the ground. "She didn't leave when it got hard." Then he climbed in and shut the door. Greg didn't say a word. Just nodded once. Then the car rolled off, slow and quiet. I stood at the edge of the driveway long after it disappeared. Inside, I returned to the garden house. The air still smelled like his cocoa. I climbed the small step stool, cleared a space above Evelyn's old desk, and hung the painting. The heron, tall among the irises, watched me back. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was guarding something from being taken. I felt like I had given something. A place. A memory. A home. And the house, it had become exactly what it was always meant to be.